Ladies and gentlemen, threading and shredding everything in sight, it's the Strings and Things podcast. On this show, musicians come by to change their guitar strings, and they talk about all kinds of things. After we swap some stories and clean up the mess, the new strings get a workout and a special performance with our guest. Hanging out in the front parlor this week is electric guitarist Matt Grossman. Let's hand this over to our host, Patrick Grant, and see what he's got.
I would like to welcome guitarist Matt Grossman to our show.
Hey man, how are you?
Pretty good. You're a working musician in New York City.
If you can call it working.
I met Matt over 3 years ago now at one of our Tilted Axes events. I think he's an awesome guitarist. I'm really happy to have him on the show.
I'll do my best to prove you wrong.
He's forgotten more about jazz chord voicings than I will ever know.
And I've really forgotten a lot.
Yeah, we know why.
Yeah. What?
Anyways, tell me your background in music.
I'm a native New Yorker, self-taught musician.
They say that he who's self-taught is a fool for a master.
I could not deny that. Yeah, I grew up here, studied with a lot of guys.
And how was that self-taught?
I don't know. I never went to school for it. I don't have a degree in music. Take lessons with people as they show up. Basically been working. I've done a lot of theater, some music direction, a lot of jazz gigs, a lot of rock gigs, run some bands, done some sideman work. All part of what I laughingly call a career.
That's the nature of it, pretty much. I find out in this town. It's just all of a sudden you realize that this crazy quilt of things that sort of patch together and amount to, hey, this is what I'm doing. You're making a living, quote unquote. It doesn't happen overnight. It becomes sort of a retro observation.
Yeah, like you look back on it and you're like, wow, I guess that was sort of a career. I work for a couple of old school 70s rock acts. I was recently on the road on an Oktoberfest polka gig.
This I find very interesting.
Take the work where it comes, you know. Probably the oddest moment of the last couple of years was walking out of a beer hall playing an Oktoberfest gig right into a soul food restaurant where I had my R&B jazz gig that night. Not coming from either culture, I found it very, very exploratory.
Excellent. What kind of guitar did you bring today?
This is a Brian Moore iGuitar. It's been with me for a few years. It's my less expensive guitar. I also have a custom thing that I take out for more special occasions, but that one would be harder to replace because there's only one of it. But yeah, this guy's been all over the country with me. It's a solid body electric, kind of halfway between a Les Paul and a Strat. I think it's a Strat neck scale.
I'd say that's a good description. It is sort of halfway between the two. Like if somebody put in the two shapes into a computer and said, like, and average these out. It's
a dual humbucker mahogany guitar, but it's got a Fender neck scale. And it has a synth that I've never, ever used.
Built in? Or?
Yeah, it's got a built-in 13-pin jack.
Is that just like really like an envelope filter, really? Or?
No, it's a MIDI pickup built into the guitar for use with guitar synths.
But there's no synthesizer in there?
No, it's a synth pickup in here.
In the synth interface, okay.
Yeah, which I've never used because I'm sort of a meat and potatoes kind of guy.
I have to admit, I've never really been the biggest fan of guitar synths. I can understand their usefulness when you need to trigger a synth, but in terms of you'd sort of play a guitar because you like the sound of a guitar and you're playing with strings. And if you want to play a synth, you might as well use the keys because it's all about, it's just about being a controller. If you feel better controlling it, but I think a lot is lost if you're trying to do anything too fancy on a guitar and play a synth.
The synth pickups never pick up the
tracking
notes properly. It's always sort of weak.
Sluggish. The latency is still there.
If I need a pianist, I know plenty of good pianists who can come and play the instrument the way it would be played better with 10 fingers on a keyboard rather than approximating some shitty voicing on a guitar.
Yeah.
If I need a trumpet player, I can call a trumpet player. They're going to do their job better than I will. And I can play guitar and do that well.
And besides, I think of you as a guitarist, so that's good.
As opposed to a trumpet player guitarist or a...
You are a lead guitarist.
I'm a wanker. That's what he means.
Well, yeah, that's right. Too many notes, Mr. Mozart. In Hollywood, they have lead actors and then they have character actors. So I figured, like, I'm not a lead guitarist, I'm a character guitarist, which is somewhere between a rhythm guitar and a lead guitar, in that I tend to gravitate, because of my keyboard background, towards parts that are more distinctive in terms of, I'll never out-bluesman a guy who's dedicated his life to the blues, but I can contribute something that could be more from the outside. You know, if we were the Rolling Stones and we were playing Satisfaction, I'd be the guy going, maybe the easiest part, but the one you'll remember the most. You know, so I always tend to gravitate towards parts like that. But anyways, this is a lead guitarist we'll be dealing with today, or
What do you think
a
of me?
wanker rather. So,
Yeah, that's me.
And I myself, in terms of this series, I'm just going to be, it's my real Les Paul that I'll be changing the strings on. Are you putting on the, you're going with 11s.
No, nines.
Oh, I thought
Nines. Yeah, I used to use heavier strings.
I see. Your finger was coming up the 11s.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a 5-string set of 11s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to use heavier strings, but I decided that it's an electric guitar, and I could stop doing the work myself and let the damn machine do the work for me the way it's designed to.
Mm-hmm.
This is like that silence when people start eating.
Can you remember the first piece of music that you heard that made you say, hey, I could probably do that?
I don't think it was as much a question of could, as much as maybe the moment that I realized that I had to, which was a sort of different understanding for me, because I had music lessons in various instruments when I was a kid. But I think I was in my mid-teens, and I was listening to, depending on how legit you are, you'll think this is hilarious or hate me for it, but the Gypsy Kings' Alegria, it's one of their records. Somewhere in the middle of it, I realized a compelling need. Yeah, I mean, if you're into legit flamenco, you'll be like, oh, the Gypsy Kings. But if you're a guitar player, you'll go like, oh, well, yeah.
I don't think those things make a difference, because we don't know anything when we're that young and we're just hearing stuff. We just all of a sudden say, hey, this stuff resonates with me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there's a certain point, I guess, in the life of every musician where it becomes a compelling need more than something that, like, maybe you have an idea that you could do. I think that's the thing that makes people musicians.
Where did that take you from there? Did you all of a sudden decide to buy every flamenco album possible, or?
No. I mean, I guess that would have been a sort of reasonable thing to do, but of course that's not how I did it. Nor have I ever studied flamenco guitar. No, I just started practicing all the time.
So you're already playing, because you said you already were taking lessons.
No, I'd had music lessons when I was a kid. Some piano, obviously, some flute, some violin, some this, some that. I come from a music family. Every male on my father's side, for as many generations as anyone remembers, has been a professional musician. Mm-hmm. My pop really made an effort to not get me into the business. He was trying to get me away from the family curse. I was educated in music, but it wasn't something I really did with my family. But I just decided that guitar was the thing at a certain point in my teens, and started to clock hours.
Is there any particular way you like changing your strings?
So I guess it depends a little bit on the kind of instrument you're changing the strings on. The kind of bridge makes a big difference. On certain kinds of tremolo bridges, I prefer to keep one string on at all times. If the tension is completely released on the bridge, sometimes that's really a pain in the ass. There's one guitar that I have where you want to really change one string at a time, because otherwise it takes you forever to tune back up, because it's a tremolo bridge with strings.
Oh, yeah.
And so once the tension changes, everything's fucked. But if you change one at a time, it works out pretty well. Another tip that I've heard and and I guess use sometimes, but it doesn't really seem to make a huge difference, more an infinitesimal one, is that when you string the guitar, it's probably a good idea to do it from the G and D strings outward, because you're putting tension more on the center of the neck rather than pulling the neck from one side to another. In the cold light of day, how much difference that really makes.
I can pretty much see, especially this guitar, which I know the best, by the tuner, I can see what's happening to the other strings while I tune one. And not a lot's happening. It's just going down a couple cents in this and that direction, depending on the tension. So nothing grave is happening to the neck. It's not flopping around like one of those San Francisco bridges in old hurricane footage or something like that. Earthquake footage.
Flopping around like ...
What was your first guitar then? And I mean, since you already had instruments laying around, I'd have to ask then, what was your first real guitar?
One was a Yamaha student model electric, just a regular sort of
Paul
single
copy?
pickup. It was a single pickup, but shaped like a Stratocaster. I guess it was like one of those 80s shredder sort of shapes. Then I quickly got a really like a beast of a guitar. It was a I think it was a Washburn, and if I'm not mistaken, it may have been a Carlos Cavazio signature model. It was a Explorer copy with a triangular neck, sort of like the old Strats. I think maybe the Clapton model has a sort of triangular neck, or one of them. It's weird. It's got, instead of being shaped with a curve here on the back of the neck, it comes to a point.
Oh, okay.
It was weird.
I wouldn't want to feel that pressing into my...
I mean, whatever, like it...
I was so stoned I couldn't feel a thing during that decade.
I don't even know where I am right now. Yeah, so I played on that for a while. I played it into the fucking ground, honestly. It's now a fretless wonder somewhere in my closet. Went through a couple of others. I had a Strat for a while that never really worked out for me. I've played some that I like, but not that one.
That's why I like Jaguars. I like Telecasters. Strats didn't work out for me.
I've played a couple of Tellies I really liked. I've never really been able to get a sound out of a Jaguar myself. They tend toward the raspier, and I tend to like a more fuller-throated sound.
Yeah, for me, it depends on the use. I tell everybody I like the Jaguar when I'm playing a large ensemble, so I can hear the parts.
Yeah.
But when you're definitely down to, small numbers of musicians, definitely you want a fuller sound. That's where, I'm very happy to use my Les Paul.
That's true, and also depending on the kind of part, there's, really a use for that pointy sound. Also in recording, they're useful for layering parts.
But that's why, I think a lot of Bach can sound pretty horrible on a grand piano.
Depending on who's playing it.
Well, that's for sure. But, pianos that were made for, the Romantic era music of, Franz Liszt and all that. And even I know, Glenn Gould was meticulous with his craftsman about his Steinway to use hard hammers, get that brittle sound, because he grew up playing a Chickering piano.
It's funny with that. It's like with electric bass guitars, how a lot of the high-end ones are made to have a ton of sustain the way a six-string electric wants to have a lot of sustain.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys, if they want a good tone, they have to go to great lengths to mute the sustain on those things, to the point of putting foam by the bridge of the
bass guitar. The bass,
for bass, because a bass doesn't want to have that kind of sustain. It doesn't help anything.
Not in real life.
No, not in real life.
It sounds like it would have a tendency to just make things too muddy and bleed through, and you're better off to have a tasty room reverb than to actually have an actual sustain.
Yeah, I mean, really you want tap and thump for anything in the bass frequencies. Mm-hmm. You need to hear the attack, and it has to have a nice round full body, and then it wants to go away.
Ooh, I all of a sudden felt the vibe of certain bass players out there vehemently disagreeing, but there you go.
When a bass is playing alone by itself, it can have as much sustain as it wants, in my opinion. But when it's functioning inside of an ensemble, it sort of starts to, in my opinion, want to do certain things.
Right.
So here we are changing our strings. When I took mine off, I realized that, wow, they really need it too. I tend to be a little relaxed about when I remember to change my strings, like when I feel a particularly large amount of gunk, or have a lot of gigs in a week or something. I'll change them. Usually, other than that, I sort of let them stay on until I take them off, and they're gross.
Not as pristine.
No, gross. Like, ew.
I'm on my 4th string here. I've decided.
Are you really on your 4th string? I haven't put any of them on, but I'm dealing with fretboard gunk right now.
Well, I have dealt with fretboard gunk recently, so I'm okay in that department.
Lemon oil is very good for that.
Yes, I have some if you want some.
Oh, no, I'm good. Thank you. I'd like to note that I'm not taking the piece of advice that I just passed on, and I'm starting with my low E. And if my guitar neck snaps in half in the middle of this interview, we'll know why.
And I myself, I don't know why I still have this weird phobia about like that high string snapping or something. I think I had a couple low quality strings when I was a kid and they snapped. But you never read on the front page of the paper man loses eyeball because E string pops out or something like that.
Yeah, I've never seen that in the paper. I think it would make the news if that happened. So.
Or
maybe
if somebody wanted a guitar for Christmas, it'd be like, "Careful, kid, you'll poke your eye out." Yeah.
Could put an eye out with one of those for real.
But you play in a lot of different genres. Is there any observations that you could say about different guitarists you like for different kinds of music?
Honestly, I tend to not think of it that way. Right now, I have this Brian Moore. I have an Ibanez Artist semi-hollow body, and I have a custom. Also a solid body, a little bit more Gibson-ish perhaps. I think I would play just about any kind of music on any of them. They all have slightly different voices, but that's not a criteria I necessarily use for choosing when I'd use it on a style. Although, it's possible that for a gig where I'm doing a lot of funk strumming, I might want to use something that has a good bright sound, like something a little bit single coilish or with a coil tap.
Right.
And a nice thin pick to get the loose wrist funk strumming.
Like a German fictional character. Have you talked to loose wrist funk strumming lately? It just had a nice name to it.
Wow, that's going to be like my new hip hop name.
Loose wrist funk strumming.
Yeah.
Herr funk strumming.
I spanken Sie Deutsch.
Yeah.
I think that styles involve a certain vocabulary, I suppose. What kind of voice you use in the tune should be maybe related to your role in the ensemble more than the style of music. A brighter, harsher sound for more percussive parts, with something more full-throated for something that's going to be in higher registers and singing. Really, it's just about songs. The style's going to have a certain bounce, like a time feel, and that's really what distinguishes styles from each other, I guess. Time feel and like harmonic content. Really, you just learn the song and try not to play bad notes on it.
Don't play the stuff that doesn't sound right.
Yeah, exactly. Like all those bad notes, try not to play those.
One of the things, I've been having a lot of fun with my Fender Jaguars lately because I've decided to not rely upon the amps so much as like really just understanding the knobs and the controls and the switches. And I've been very happy with those results now. And really realizing that if you set up the amp ahead of time, you can really get the maximum amount of play out of those knobs.
That's a good trick. It's interesting, the evolution of this instrument is really sort of related to the evolution of, I guess the 20th century in electric music. Recorded music and anything that's amplified.
Is there any more American instrument than the electric guitar? No, is the answer.
No, I think not.
Everything else comes from someplace else, with a possible exception. There could be an argument.
Maybe turntables, if you call them an instrument?
Yeah, or I'd say with an argument for maybe the Mini Moog.
Okay.
The first commercially affordable, portable.
Right, the same way the guitar is essentially European, but the electric guitar is essentially American.
That's absolutely American.
Yeah.
And we have the patents to prove it. France, it's Fender, not Fender.
It's interesting to consider that every point in the signal chain, all the way from the pick straight through to the speaker, is part of your instrument. And, so how you set up the knobs on the amp and how you set up the knobs on the guitar kind of can't help but be related to each other, whether you're conscious of it or not.
Do you have any gig-related stories that you think you'd like to share?
I walked out of a week's intensive Tai Chi training.
Sounds like the beginning of a blues.
I walked out of the end of a week's intensive Tai Chi training. And I went to my gig. So I walked out of this week's intensive training, and I scheduled a gig for the Friday night of the last night of the thing, which was probably a big mistake, but hey, you know, whatever. So I get down to this place that I'm playing. It's a fun gig. It's R&B jazz sort of thing that I sometimes play in a soul food restaurant in Brooklyn. It's a fun gig. The food's really good. We start playing, and I think we were doing Herbie Hancock's Chameleon, whatever. We're just like getting warmed up, starting to jam. And I'm in the middle of a solo. I start to smell smoke. So I'm there, blowing away in G minor, B flat minor. Yeah, I think we were in B flat. Anyway, I'm looking down at my pedals, over at my amp, see if it's me that's on fire. It's like an electrical smell. Mm-hmm. It's not me. Looking at the rest of the people on stage, like, hey, do you guys smell smoke? And I noticed them looking around too, but we're all still playing. You know, you don't just stop.
Right. In a city so full of smells.
Right, exactly. So all of a sudden, smoke starts to pour out of the vents. First thing that goes across my mind, because I know they just remodeled. So I'm like, wow, did they put in a smoke machine? So it turns out that was not what had happened.
Is this for my solo?
Exactly. Someone's like, fire! And people start to hustle out of the club. The band like kind of trails off, and I start to think about what I'm going to do. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to pack up my equipment. I'm like, wait, no, I'm going to pack up my equipment quickly. Because I'm not leaving it in here, but I'm damn sure not going to die in here. I see the drummer. He's got his cymbal in one hand and his beer in the other, and he's walking toward the door. And then he stops. He's like, what am I doing? He puts the cymbal down, drinks the beer. No, he didn't do that. He put the beer down. But it was this funny moment.
But that's how, like,
But, you know, that's what you're thinking.
All great jokes come from real things.
Oh, well, so we're standing outside with all of our equipment, watching fire coming out of the roof and firemen with ladders and hoses. And that was when we were really on fire jokes started.
We were smoking.
Yeah, exactly. That's only ever happened to me once. And that was that one time. How many other gig stories can you say where it's like, oh yeah, that's never happened to me before? We actually burned down the house.
Yeah.
So I started watching this show Game of Thrones.
Right.
And I never thought I would be watching a fantasy show.
Our producer of this show is a huge fan of the genre when done well.
Well, that's the thing. It's very rarely done well. I don't think maybe ever on film. So I never thought that in my adult life I would be watching one of these, and it's so well done. I was like, wow, this is fucking great.
Well, there you go. I mean, I myself am not a big fan of Westerns, and so I stay away from those, you know, especially old-timey Westerns. I mean, however, I do remember one of the first movies I do remember seeing as a kid was going to the drive-in, and we saw the True Grit. I wouldn't call it the first, like, you know, anti-Western, but it's when, like, you know, the whole Sergio Leone aesthetic sort of trickled down into, like, you know, a more general audience kind of a thing. And
the genre became a little more anti-heroic, and the distinction between the good guys and the bad guys started to be a little bit more realistic.
I was going to say exactly that. The anti-hero started becoming a thing.
Well, it's funny. I actually enjoy Westerns. It's one of the the genres that I find very compelling. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that's sort of interesting to me about it is that the act of liking a genre can put you in positions of enjoying examples of the genre even when you know that they're bad, because you like the genre. And so you can find things that you like even in bad examples of a genre that you like.
Yeah, or conversely, like when there's a genre you don't like, when somebody uses that as a way of telling a specific kind of story, like, oh, this is excellent. You know, like I'm glad that this story, which already sort of rubs us the wrong way, is told in a way that rubs us even more the wrong way, because it's sort of like a weird genre fit.
Right. I mean, and it's also interesting how even a very well-told story in a genre that you don't like can be totally unattractive. As an example of what I was talking about, you know, I like jazz. I periodically find myself, you know, at the bank depositing a check or whatever, and they've got their canned bank jazz going.
Right.
And I'm tapping my foot on the 2 and the 4, and I'm like, wow, yeah, I know it's canned processed shit, but this guy's a really good player. It's funny. You when there's something that you enjoy, you can even enjoy bad examples of that thing. It's funny. Watch how quickly this goes out of tune.
Trying to figure out what that is.
Because it sounds a lot like a few things.
Right. There we go. So we have all our strings are changed now.
They're changed. It will sure be sometime before they're in tune.
Yeah, I'm rubbing my hands up and down, stretching strings, everything possible. What do you have going on currently? I always like to ask our guests.
What's going on right now? Couple weeks, I've got something out of town with a band called Stories. They were big in the early 70s. Ian Lloyd.
Oh, this is the Louie Louie guy.
Yeah, the Louie Louie guy.
Do you play on the version of Louie Louie that's used on Louis C.K.'s TV show now?
No, I do not. Ian does sing on it.
Yeah, I know that he re-recorded it for FX.
There has been more than once where he has regretted that being a work-for-hire situation. But, that's how it goes.
Well, we didn't know it was going to turn out to be such a big show.
That's a great show. Louis is so smart. If you were to combine Richard Pryor and Woody Allen into one writer, I find him difficult to watch because it's very dark, but I think he's very smart. I've got a couple of jazz things coming up over the next little bit. Been putting together a sort of new fusion project, doing a little writing for dance, finishing up a duet recording with a pianist that I work with a lot. If I'm going to be underpaid to play music, I may as well underpay myself to play my own music, because otherwise,
that you can get behind.
Otherwise, what are you doing,
So why don't we try out these guitars with our new strings and see how it sounds?
Let's do it.
As always, that was cool. Thank you.
Oh, man, that was great, Patrick. I love playing with you.
So I want to thank you for being on the show.
Oh, it's been great being here. Thanks for inviting me down.
Rock on.
That's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us. Our guest has been Matt Grossman, and you can find out more about him at mattgrossmanmusic.com. That's MattGrossman music.com. Special thanks to Vox Amps USA, D'Addario Strings, and Electro-Harmonics New York City. I'm Jocelyn Gonzalez on the Zeros and Ones, and Patrick Grant is our host and axe wrangler. Strings and Things is a Peppergreen production for Headstepper Media. Visit us on the web at stringsandthingsshow.com. See you next time.